going to share with you some of the research that we've been working on over the last couple of years, which is really about eating behaviors and this idea that it's not so much what we eat, but how we eat that has a big influence on our overall health. And this was a little bit of a surprise finding for us in our research, so we're pretty excited to be sharing it with everybody. So just to start off here, I'll give you a moment to take a look at this. All right, so this is the, to prevent a heart attack, take 1 aspirin every day. Take it out for a run, then take it to the gym, then take it on a bike ride, right? So this is illustrative of some of the more holistic approaches that we try to take rather than the idea that simple pills can fix everything. We really try to look at our lifestyles and a holistic approach in naturopathic medicine. So in naturopathic nutrition research, which is my area of expertise, we focus on this because diet really is a pretty, I consider it a cornerstone of our overall health. I'm going to talk about diabetes a fair bit because diabetes is a condition that there's a huge role for lifestyle in both managing and preventing diabetes, but it applies for everybody whether you have diabetes or not. So the dietary aspects are absolutely critical to diabetes management, but we know that for most people, whether you have diabetes or not, that knowing what to eat and how to follow a healthy dietary pattern is extremely challenging, right? It's hard for all of us. It's hard for me in my busy life, right? So understanding what to do, how to eat, and how to incorporate that into your life is very important. There's a good bit of research out there showing associations between people who use complementary and alternative medicine, including naturopathic medicine, that those people are healthier. They have healthier behaviors. They report their health as being better than the previous year. Now, so far, this is just associations. So some of the research we're working on is really to figure out this cause and effect. How much of an impact does naturopathic medicine really have on changing people's overall health? Not just their individual risk factors, but how do you feel? You know, do you feel better? Do you feel more well? So that's sort of some of the context for some of the naturopathic nutrition research that we have done. So I'm going to tell you about a specific clinical trial, and then we're going to go through some of the things that we learned from that trial that you all can incorporate into what you think about over the holidays here. So this was a naturopathic nutrition study that we did with people with type 2 diabetes. It was a 12-week clinical trial where we tested a holistic naturopathic approach to diabetes. We taught people how to follow an approach, this nutrition approach. We did that through one-on-one education with naturopathic physicians. They came to group visits, a wide variety of educational materials. And then we found out how they did at the end of 12 weeks, and I'll show you some of those results. This research was supported by the NIH, National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and also from a grant from the Diabetes Foundation that supports a lot of holistic diabetes research. And if you want to read the scientific details of it, 2 publications there that have resulted from it. So what is a naturopathic approach? Is that what was kind of running in the back of your mind? What am I talking about here? So, so this is the protocol, and I'll walk you through some of the examples here. So the first thing is macronutrient balance. So macronutrients are those cryptic words that we talk about: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. How familiar are you all with those 3 terms? Do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about carbs? So carbs are things like breads, whole grains, cookies, pasta, things largely that are made with a grain-based ingredient. Usually that's flour. Protein, of course, is often animal-based, so all of our meats, dairy products, those are all good examples of protein. But there's also great plant sources of protein, things like beans, legumes, nuts, seeds. Those are all great sources of protein. And then, of course, fat is our 3rd macronutrient category. Most of us know fats, the animal fats, the visible fats that we can see, the animal fats and dairy products when they're whole fat dairy products. And then there's also plant fats, things like avocados, coconuts. Again, those nuts and seeds have some fat component. So in a naturopathic diabetes approach, we focus on a pretty low carbohydrate, high protein, moderate fat approach. And those numbers always become, we see a lot of numeric percentage recommendations on nutrition, whether it's naturopathic or otherwise. And it's extremely confusing to everybody. Who knows what 20% carbs looks like on a plate? I couldn't necessarily tell you with the plate in front of me if that's 20% carbohydrate. So this is really just the science speak side of it, but the take home is low carb, high protein, moderate fat. The next nutritional principle focuses on low glycemic index. This is a part of many pieces of this approach here that focus on the quality of what we eat. So a glycemic index, how many have heard that term? Great, fantastic, most of you have. So glycemic index is a measure of how the carbohydrates that you eat are used in your body. So foods that are low glycemic index are foods that have a lot of fiber in them, or combination meals with a lot of other ingredients in them. And your body uses the sugar from those meals very slowly. So when you eat carbohydrates, right, it's going to turn into sugar in your body. If it's low glycemic index, that sugar is going to come up really, really slowly. You're going to digest it slowly. Your body's going to have plenty of time to use it, and then it's going to go down nice and slowly, so you're not going to get a blood sugar crash. In comparison, if you eat something with a high glycemic index, something, for example, like a candy bar or white rice, right? Your blood sugar is going to go up really quickly. You're going to have that energy spike, but then you're going to crash really quickly, right? And you get that low afterwards. Along with that, when your blood sugar goes up really quickly, your body has to make a lot of insulin to chase that, to get rid of it, right? So your blood sugar goes up, your insulin goes up, your blood sugar crashes. Your insulin's still up here because the system's not super precise. This feels awful when your blood sugar is down here and your insulin is still up here. Puts you at risk if you have diabetes, but this is also that afternoon brain fog, when we're all tired after lunch, can't think clearly. So eating lower glycemic index foods is helpful for many reasons. The next component is this idea of micronutrient density. This is the idea that you want to eat foods that have lots of vitamins and minerals in it, right? You want a lot of nutrition for every calorie that you get. You want to skip empty calorie foods. You want to pick things that are packed with those important micronutrients. Things like fruits and vegetables are a great example of that. The next concept is this idea of functional foods. Functional foods are foods that have healthful benefit in them. So I really like to emphasize this idea of adding foods to our diets rather than constantly taking away and reducing and feeling deprived. So functional foods would be something like eating oatmeal in the morning, right? Because oats are a functional food that's going to help reduce your cholesterol. It's full of fiber, lots of good whole grain antioxidants in that. So that's an example of a functional food, something that you can add that's going to give you health benefits. We help people understand the quality of the food, so how to tell good fats from bad fats, how to understand when it may be important to think about organic food or wild food, that idea that there are some fruits and vegetables that are more likely to be contaminated than others, and so picking and choosing, understanding when it matters to really focus on quality and when maybe it doesn't matter quite so much. And then these last two are the pieces that we're going to emphasize today. Understanding eating behavior and cultivating healthful attitudes towards food, right? So it's not just what you eat. The good part of the naturopathic approach is also understanding why we eat and how we eat. So understanding where our personal eating behaviors interact with how we make our choices. I'm going to skip through most of the detail on this. But in this research study, we measured a wide variety of different outcomes, not just blood sugar control in these people with diabetes, but the overall result here is that we tried to measure things very holistically because we take a pretty holistic approach to health. So when we're doing our research, we try to measure the holistic impact of any particular intervention. So here's a snapshot of the results. So to remind you, these are people who followed a naturopathic nutrition protocol for 12 weeks, right? So not super long, 3 months, And they did this through spending 10 hours in learning about how to eat, both either on their own or in these group classes with naturopathic physicians. And we saw their hemoglobin A1C, the measure of blood sugar control, drop from an average of 8.2 down to 7.7. That's a big drop. That's about what you can expect from taking metformin, the diabetes medication, almost as much. We saw them make improvements in their BMI, the body mass index, right? That's a measure of weight, essentially. So they lost weight. And they made some small improvements in their blood pressure. We didn't put a whole lot of emphasis on blood pressure, but I think seeing pieces like that help us understand that when we make holistic changes in our health, we get positive side effects, things like blood pressure drop, even though we're focused on blood sugar. And then we saw some unexpected results that we were very excited about. You know, this was a nutrition study, so we were teaching people about nutrition. But we saw that they increased their physical activity spontaneously. We didn't teach them about physical activity per se, but we saw that people changed from exercising on average less than 2 days a week to going up to 5 days a week. And this makes sense when we look at some of the other research out there on how we change health behaviors. We know that when people sort of take a holistic approach to their health and try to make small changes in a lot of different domains of their lifestyle, they tend to do better than if they're just focusing on one thing and neglecting everything else. And then the most exciting changes that we're going to dive into here in detail was the fact that when we looked at trying to understand what explained those blood sugar decreases, that decrease in the hemoglobin A1C, we saw that it correlated most strongly with the emotional eating score, and the people who changed their, improved their hemoglobin A1C the most showed the biggest improvements in their integrated eating score. So this suggests that what they ate was more important, how they ate was more important than what they ate. So here's our overall, right, we certainly can't ignore what we eat and physical activity and managing our stress and those other pieces, but how we eat, I think we often ignore. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is something that you can take into the holidays with you and think about things in a different way. This is based on research by a man named Larry Sherwitz, and there are 7 eating styles that have been associated with patterns of overeating, with weight gain, and in our research now with diabetes. And so these patterns are emotional eating, food fretting, fresh food, fast food, sensory, spiritual nourishment, fast snacking, the eating atmosphere, and social fare. And so we're going to go through these. How many of you have been flipping through your questionnaire while we've been looking here? Good, everybody looked at it. And some initial responses. What did you all think of it? Were you surprised by, have any of you gone through and scored any sections for yourselves? Any observations? Anything surprise you?
Not very spiritual.
Yeah, we don't do that very well in the United States, do we? Yeah. Any other observations?
I spend a lot of time eating and doing other things at the same time, so I'm working at my desk or...
Yep, that multitasking. Absolutely. Another good American attitude, definitely. Yeah. Well, we're going to go through a few of these sort of step by step, and this is stuff that you all are experts in as well, right? You don't need to be a researcher to understand eating behaviors, right? You can reflect on this yourselves and really understand it yourself. So I invite you all to tap into your inner expertise in China as we go through these. So the first pattern is emotional eating, right? And so this is eating in response to emotional cues rather than eating just because we're hungry, right? How many of you have experienced this at least once in your life? Yeah, I thought so, exactly. So this is very common, right? Especially in our high-stress lives. You know, we live in a big, busy urban environment. We are all probably working more than we should, taking care of friends, family, a lot of competing responsibilities. So emotional eating is very common. And what this does is many things. You know, first off, when you're eating emotionally, you're not paying attention to what you're eating. by and large, right? You're sort of on autopilot, you're eating to manage your feelings. And so that results in a lot of metabolic dysregulation that ultimately sets you up for chronic disease. But I think it's important to remind people that this isn't a character flaw, right? Eating when you're feeling emotional, there are solid reasons why you do this and why people eat emotionally. You know, often, let's take the example of eating when you're depressed or anxious or something like that, right? It's a common example. So for many people, let me back up this step. So comfort foods, right? You all have heard the phrase comfort foods. What comes to mind? Maybe a big bowl of pasta, donuts, cake, mac and cheese, something with a lot of fat and carbohydrate in it, right? That's sort of our classic comfort food. Well, there's a reason for that. Those foods very literally are comfort foods. They do make us feel better. When we eat that huge amount of carbohydrate, it raises our blood sugar. We get that surge of blood sugar. It interacts with various brain pathways. It changes our neurochemistry. In particular, it causes a serotonin spike. You all have heard of serotonin probably, right? It's our comforting, our feeling good brain chemical. So when we eat that huge sugar carbohydrate meal, our serotonin goes up momentarily. We do feel better. It did comfort us. The downside is that that's very transient. It can last minutes. Some people maybe an hour or so, but very, very transient. And then you actually crash lower, right? Your serotonin is going to plummet, your blood sugar is going to plummet, and you feel worse, right? And so what does that do? That sets you up to crave more carbohydrates, right? You want to get back to that serotonin spike again. So this is, for many of my patients, you know, when they understand that it's not a character flaw, right? They're just responding to brain chemicals, right? To messages of your body. It takes away some of that guilt component, that emotional component, and you can be a little bit more objective about thinking about emotional eating. The good news is if you stay away from those carbohydrates, your brain chemistry will regulate, right? And you'll start producing more serotonin on your own. There's many dietary supplements that you can get advice about taking that can help balance that out. So there's many other ways to get there besides just high carbohydrate meals. So in our research, emotional eating was correlated most strongly with the diabetes, with the poor blood sugar control. So here's our snapshots. Looking familiar? So we have a negative emotional eating state, and we can turn this into a positive emotional eating state, right? So we can get those same feel-good hormones, things like serotonin, in other ways by tapping into the people around us and coming into your meal in a happy place. And it really does make a difference. So fresh food versus fast food is our next concept. So this is the idea. This is more of the what we eat, right? So this is choosing healthy, fresh foods, making food yourself, using whole ingredients like fruits and vegetables, as opposed to convenience foods. And a couple things going on with this. You know, most convenience foods are very calorie dense, very energy dense, but not necessarily very micronutrient dense. So you're not getting a whole lot of nutrition for your calorie. You're also typically getting a lot of additives, food colorings, preservatives, added salt, other types of ingredients that really have no health benefits at all when we're choosing more of the fast food. So this is an important step, important factor that gets at more of the what we eat. Here we have our two examples. So a great fresh food example, and in comparison, I have to say that doesn't look so appetizing, does it? All brown and brown. So food fretting is our next eating style. This is a complicated one for people, right? Because there's a balance here as you're learning to follow a healthier diet, as you're becoming more educated about your dietary choices, as you're sort of observing yourself and your eating behaviors. It's hard not to fret about it, right? And feel a little bit neurotic about it. So the balance here is, you know, you can engage in learning and sort of that self-experimentation and that self-examination, but you want to do that in a way that's compassionate to yourself, that stays away from those judgmental thoughts and being overly concerned about what you're eating, worrying or being compulsive about it, and really thinking about, developing a more balanced attitude towards making healthier choices. This is especially important during the holidays, right, when you're going to be confronted with many opportunities to make different decisions in your food. And I would encourage you all to take a step back and just be mindful about how you're treating yourself when you make those decisions, right? Sometimes you may choose that you're going to eat the stuffing because it's grandma's stuffing and you love stuffing, and you should feel good about making that if you're making it a conscious choice, right? You can balance that with other choices, like maybe eating more salad or filling up on other healthy things so that you're not going to overindulge overall, maybe a smaller slice of pie to offset the stuffing. But if you choose to eat the stuffing, don't beat yourself up about it and ruin the rest of your meal experience by fretting about it, by worrying about it. Does that make sense? I kind of shift the approach to it. So here we have our ongoing fretting, and I fully acknowledge reading labels are very complicated. The United States has probably the poorest quality label system of any country in the world, and it's really hard. So if you're struggling with this is a great thing that you can come in and talk to the Bastyr Center's naturopaths or their nutritionists or dietitians to help you understand, so that it isn't so much of a worrying stress that you're obsessing about. You can have some actual concrete skills around it. So the task snacking, this was one that somebody back there mentioned a second ago. So this is the eating while you're doing other things in the car, watching TV, on the computer, right? So I'm sure many of us feel like we need to do this because of time urgency. But this has the side effect of not being present while you're eating, right? It's very easy to eat the whole huge bowl of popcorn while you're watching a movie without realizing that you just ate 1,000 calories, right? You're not present, you're not mindful, you're not participating in eating. So the idea of task snacking and why we see it correlated with all these unhealthy eating patterns is really related to that mindfulness and that being present. If you're just sitting there one-on-one with your bowl of popcorn, I bet you that you're not going to have the same experience, right? You're going to be actually feeling what you're feeling as you're eating it. You're going to be noticing how your body is changing as you're going through that. And so going through those types of mindful eating exercises really changes, and really every meal should be approached mindfully as the sole thing that you are doing, rather than as the activity on the side while you're doing something else. So sensory spiritual nourishment. This is one that we don't do very well in the United States, and this is a great one to focus on as the holidays are coming up. This is the perfect time to really focus on those sensory aspects of the food, on the beauty of the Thanksgiving table that's filled with food that has probably a lot of meaning, right? Family recipes, things that people have brought to share, that idea of coming together to share food. Food nourishes our spirits as well as our bodies. And so tapping into that on a regular basis is important, right? It really enhances your enjoyment, and especially for people who are emotional eating or eating because of cravings or eating while they're on the computer, right? None of this activity, none of this savoring of the food can happen while you're in those other states, right? So really taking some attention to appreciate the smells of the food, the taste of the food, to say grace, whether that's out loud or just in your mind, or say thanks fish before you eat your fish, or just have some awareness of what you're eating. We see in other research studies that it increases your satiety, your sense of satisfaction with your meal, and as a result you'll eat less and you'll feel better, right? It's more holistic. So clear differences. Who do you think is enjoying their food more here? Exactly. Yeah, as I said, none of this is complicated science, right? You are all experts in eating. We do this many times a day, so tap into your inner expertise. So the eating atmosphere is the next of the 7 eating styles. So all of these things are important, right? They're equally important to mention. And so that what we eat is only one of the 7. So eating atmosphere here is also important. So this is the eating in a calm environment, right? And I'll give you a little side story to understand what's happening in your body in this environment. I'm sure you all have heard of that your nervous system runs in 2 different ways, right? We have our fight or flight hormones and our rest and digest hormones. Have you heard those terms? Right, so your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, which is designed to help you run away from that lion out on the savannah back when, in our ancestry, right? The fight or flight nervous system brings sugar to your muscles so that you can run away from that lion, right? So that you can run away from that deadline or that phone on your desk, right? Your body responds in the same way to those stressors by mobilizing your blood sugar, whether you physically run away from the danger or not. The other half of your nervous system is called the rest and digest side of the nervous system. This is your parasympathetic nervous system. And completely different hormones are operating at this time. This is the hormones that make you salivate, that makes your digestive enzymes get released, that helps you calm down and fall asleep at night. So your nervous system operates on one or the other. So when you're at your desk and you're eating and you're under stress and you're in your car and slamming on the brakes and worried about did you choose right or shutting it away because you didn't choose what you may have chosen healthfully in a different situation. When you're in that stress situation, you literally cannot digest your food well, right?
Yeah, excuse me. You said the parasympathetic then regulates the rest and
digest.
And digest.
Yeah, so your fight or flight versus your rest and digest. So when you're in fight or flight, you're not going to digest your food. So if you're in a stressful eating environment, you're not going to be absorbing the nutrition from your food. So actually sitting down when you eat, taking a deep breath, quieting yourself, lighting a candle, calming down before you eat improves your digestive system and puts your nervous system into that rest and digest system. Makes a big difference. So here we have our opposite examples. And then our final style is eating fair. This is the idea of eating alone versus eating with others. And sometimes this is out of our control, right? You can't always eat with other people around. But when we have the options, especially over the holidays, we can approach this and really think about the positive aspects of this, right? So I think especially going into the holidays, most of us are around family and friends. Usually that's a mixed bag of, a lot of positivity, but also probably some negativity and some stress. So that idea of taking a different attitude towards coming together with friends and family and really celebrating that social idea of food, of coming together to share food, right? To break bread together is sort of the old saying that goes along with this. But this is an important eating style that we see improvement. That we see when people make improvements in this, they improve their blood sugar control or their other eating behaviors. And here we have our opposite thoughts on this as well. So as I said, the findings from this has been linked to being overweight, right, the original research, and the ones that are the eating styles that are most correlated with being overweight, all 7 are, but 5 of them really jump out as being very strongly correlated with being overweight. And that's emotional eating, the what you eat, the fresh food versus the fast food, the sensory spiritual dimension, the task snacking, and the eating atmosphere. The good news is that these are completely modifiable. right? These are things that you can take control of and can make, can keep in your thought process on a meal-to-meal basis, right? So even if you're in a eating environment where perhaps you don't have control over the what, because somebody else is serving it to you, you absolutely have control over the other 6 dimensions of this. So it can help you on your path towards making healthy choices. And then I'll skip through most of the details on this. This is the diabetes results. And the most important ones for people with diabetes were the emotional eating and their overall integrated eating score. And also that sensory spiritual part that we do so, that we typically neglect in the United States. And so let's pause there before we turn to this handout and kind of back to the what's. Any thoughts or observations on these eating behaviors? Anybody have any comments or questions on them? Mm-hmm.
Well, I find like when I eat with other people, I get into that same like mindless, like I'm not paying attention to what I'm eating because I'm distracted by conversation or something like that.
Yeah, good point.
To register the food.
Good point, definitely. So before I offer any solutions, what about the rest of you? You all are probably experts in this, having been in this situation, right? We all have. Anybody have any thoughts on how you balance the mindfulness of your plate with the enjoying being surrounded by friends and family? So this might be a great opportunity to turn to some of those other styles, right? So that you're paying attention to some of those other dimensions. So you might want to put a little bit more attention into the what, right? So that you know your portion size before you begin, or you know what went on your plate before you're tuning your attention to the meal, right? This is a good thing to practice at Thanksgiving. You may want to slow down while you're in that social situation so that you're really savoring. You might want to include that as part of the conversation that you're having with your friends so that you're really reflecting on, oh my gosh, look at this amazing meal. This smells amazing. Did you taste that particular spice in this bite? So you can engage them as well in improving perhaps their overall awareness of these other aspects of eating. So you can maybe play with some different ways to bring some mindfulness into it. Yeah, anybody have anything else to chime in on that?
Well, yeah, there seems to be a little bit of a problem when dining in a restaurant with friends. I tend to be a slow eater, and I do most of the time I am mindful of what I'm eating, but almost all the time I'm the slowest one at the table, and the waiters or wait people snatch away the plates from the others. So there I am with my plate. And it loses, for me, it loses interest. I just didn't want to clean up. Everything else is finished.
Absolutely. Did you all hear that?
Yeah, how to deal with that.
Here. Yeah. So she's reflecting on the challenge of eating in restaurants, right, where she actually is being more mindful and eating more slowly and perhaps savoring what's in front of her, finding herself being the slowest of the group, and that the waiters snatch everything away from the other people who've eaten more quickly, and then she's eating alone and fretting because she's eating alone, and so that mindfulness actually is setting her up for many of the other negative dimensions. That is a challenge, absolutely. Our American culture is definitely not eating this way, right? This is why we have the problems that we have. So I wonder if maybe, that might be an opportunity for sharing some observations with your friends, right? I was at this lecture on Saturday, and I heard about these eating styles and slowing down and how we need to savor. And gosh, isn't it funny how when we eat out, we all rush and then somebody's left behind? I don't know, maybe you can
or maybe
play
actually
with it a little
talking
bit.
to the waiter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And stopping the waiter from.
Yeah.
I've never tried that, but I guess I should.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, waiter. We're still all eating here, you know. So take control of your
Yeah.
situation and see what happens. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I'm not surprised to hear that, and that absolutely is a challenge.
It's not that way in Europe. You can sit for hours.
Right, a very
No
different
one will
culture.
take a plate away.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. The table is yours for the recipe.
Right.
Right. And what do we see in terms of national obesity trends and chronic disease patterns? You know, people are less unhealthy in Europe, becoming more unhealthy as they follow more and more American dietary patterns. But yeah, absolutely, taking more of that European style. I mean, that's part of the benefit that we see in dietary patterns like a Mediterranean diet, right? And I'm talking real Mediterranean diets with lots of fruits and vegetables and olive oil and fish, not the American Mediterranean diet that's a big pile of pasta, right? But a true Mediterranean diet. It's not just that what they eat, it's how they eat it, that they do it slowly over these long meals, and they come together and they put, you know, substantial time into preparing these foods and flavoring it with love and thought and process, right? So it's the Mediterranean dietary pattern really reflects these eating styles more so than just the what they eat. So here's a few snapshots of some possible holiday dinners. Shall we do some diagnosis? Anybody want to offer any observations on which ones might be more conducive to savoring and enjoying and focusing on the eating pattern?
It looks like the one in the top left-hand corner is similar to the one in the bottom right-hand, but the one on the top left is like fried, etc., and the one in the bottom doesn't have, or the in the bottom right doesn't have the like crust around the turkey, for example, so that doesn't have the oils, and so that's like the best quality.
Yeah, so she's pointing out that these two look like more healthful meals, right? And these, you know, don't look healthful, but they also don't look really enjoyable, do they? Right?
It's also the presentation.
One
Yeah.
may have lots of preservatives. That's what I'm
Yeah, you're not
That
going
it's
to
a
savor
prepared-
this very well, right?
commercially prepared.
Mhm.
Maybe in their way.
The first thing I see, the first thing I see is the presentation. I immediately am drawn to the upper left. Because it looks great, it's the right proportions, there's this nice utensils on the side, you know, there are more meals coming, I can see from the and so I was drawn to the colors.
Yeah.
And the right lower corners like just being dumped on. Like, boom, here you got your food, now eat it.
Right. Exactly. These are appealing. Healthful eating is beautiful eating, right? You have a rainbow of colors on your plate. It's full of different textures and flavors, and you know. So if you follow cues like this, looking at your plate, is this a beautiful plate? Chances are it's going to be a healthful plate. Right? So you can use your own intuition and your own knowledge of these eating styles to help reduce some of that fretting side, right? You're not going to approach a meal like that, and you may gobble through it, right, because of those comfort food habits that we're unlearning. But I bet you can all probably imagine, how are you going to feel after that? Maybe not so great, right? It's probably going to sit real heavy. You're going to be in that blood sugar insulin dysregulation coma after the meal, right? So tap into your inner knowledge about this and really look for that rainbow. And so the other handout you have here are more of the practical tips, right? So I certainly want you to keep in mind the 7 eating styles, but here are a few ones that you can also think about to help bring this to other people that you're going to share the holidays with. You know, substitute. Try some more helpful recipes instead of some of the traditions. Add some extra nutrition to them. You know, that idea of micronutrient density by adding nuts and seeds to your pilaf, or maybe some extra vegetables. So do some substitutions. Cut back where you won't notice it, right? So most of our recipes, we can cut the sugar and the fat substantially without messing up the recipe. And so you can find a lot of specifics on substitutions and how to cut back sugar, and how to substitute things like applesauce instead of some of the fats in your meals. Lots of good tips online for things like that. So cut back where you're not going to notice it and where no one else is going to notice it either. And then this third one I think is also very important: indulge where it matters, right? This is that idea that I was talking about. You know, if grandmother's stuffing is the thing that you love, go for it. You know, enjoy it, savor it, tap into all of those other eating behaviors and those eating styles that really make that a sensory, spiritual experience for you. And balance it out with making some more prudent choices somewhere else. Portion size, smaller plates always help. And plates, really not just smaller portions on a huge plate, because that, you know, our eyes play a big role in this, but smaller plates for everybody. It really does help. And then you can make some specific choices. These next couple just run through some of the choices that you can make. And balance it out with other things like physical activity. Thanksgiving's a great day to take some time to go for a walk in the morning, or go outside, get some activity in with the family beforehand. Maybe take a walk after dinner when everybody's feeling full. That's a great time to do to move and reduce some of that. And, you know, slow down and savor it. Right? Get out of that sympathetic fight or flight mode that many of us may find ourselves in because you're trying to orchestrate a large meal and no one's helping you in the kitchen perhaps, or because you're, you know, feeling tension with family members. So try to get yourself out of that fight or flight mode, because there's nothing to fight or flight from usually at that moment. And try to shift into that rest and digest. Take a deep breath. Choose to let it go. And really let yourself slow down and savor the holidays. And along with that, I think, is setting reasonable goals for yourself. Right? I advise all of my patients to approach the holidays with a maintain attitude. Right? This is not a time really where very many of us are going to be successful if we're trying to lose weight. So for the holidays, maintain, I think, is a good approach. If you can get through the holidays at your same body weight, it's a pretty good goal, pretty good accomplishment. So having that compassion and reasonable with yourself is important as well. So we'll just end here with some snapshots of some savory meals that you can use all of your senses to enjoy and that are also going to be helpful for you. Oh, I forgot I had this whole section. I'll skip through this quickly because I think we've covered it. So if you do want to get a little bit more concrete about how you're going to incorporate these things, I recommend that people really focus on, you know, what are their goals and what are those realistic goals, like maintaining weight, and then how are you going to translate that into action? So really asking yourself, you know, when are you going to act? How am I going to act? Where am I going to act? Right, so this might be a good one to tackle for Thanksgiving. This is coming up next week. So, right, so when is this going to happen for yourself? Maybe it's the appetizers around Thanksgiving that you want to focus on, right? And so when, before the meal, when it's that mindless nibbling, when it's the extra calories, maybe that's when you're going to focus on this. How? Maybe you're going to set a recommendation for yourself that you're going to take responsibility and bring a fresh vegetable plate, right? So that you know that you have a good choice for that. Or maybe if you know it's going to be there, you're going to set, you know, whatever parameter for yourself that you're going to savor one of the cookies that you just love every year, and you're going to eat it really slowly so that you really enjoy it. Who knows what it'll be, right? But thinking about that, how you're actually going to do this. And really visualizing it, you know, where is this going to happen? Is this going to happen, you know, while you're in the kitchen multitasking, and so it's going to be mindless. So visualize yourself there, and visualize yourself, you know, making those different choices. So this is that, just translating your goals into actions that you can actually imagine yourself doing. And a few other pieces on this, you know, the setting realistic goals, becoming that watcher of yourself, becoming mindful, engaging the people around you and helping you with this, so using social support, You know, telling perhaps your whole family, we're really going to try to make this a healthful holiday. And we're going to do that by focusing on really enjoying and savoring and slowing down, not necessarily cutting out all of our traditional favorites. And experiment, you know, try out some behaviors. See what happens when you make a quinoa pilaf instead of a white rice pilaf. You know, try out some things and see how it goes. See how it works if you go for a walk after dinner as part of the new Thanksgiving ritual. Try out some things. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any specifics.
I was curious about your take on eating like up to 30 small snacks throughout the day as opposed to, you know, even just 6 meals or 3 meals, obviously, but as part of the more Paleolithic route. Your take on that?
I think that there are many different sort of metabolism patterns. Some people respond better to a snacking approach than other people. 30 snacks a day, if I were to try to do that, that would put me into that food fretting category, right? I'd be thinking about it constantly. It's probably also, you know, there are some advantages to the fasting state, you know, to letting your body come to a rest before meals and letting those hunger cues kick in before your next meal. So it's really a balance. The extreme of that, the 1 meal a day, I think we can solidly say that's not a healthy pattern. That activates a whole bunch of stress hormones that aren't going to set you up well. But somewhere between, you know, a 3 meals a day or smaller snacks, maybe in the range of 5 to 6, you know, that's a pretty helpful pattern for most people. And of course, what and how much certainly play a role. Dr. Bradley?
So I guess I've had a common experience around holiday meals where there seems to be, even though the intention is enjoyment and sharing, there's so much stress around the performance of the meal and getting everything just right for everybody to sit down. And so do you have any recommendations for how do you reduce that performance anxiety?
Anybody else want to chime into that first?
Just didn't tranquilize.
Take Xanax, is that what you said?
The root cause might be that in this country we're just not used to eating, you know, family style at the dinner table all the time, and that this is a true exception in the year of how we're eating instead of, you know, just another occasion. It's just with nicer linen on the table.
So maybe practice.
Yeah,
right?
well,
Practice.
I mean, because I'm just, you know, I'm recalling Christmas dinners at my place. I'm a European, but you know, we're always eating around the table, and it was a special meal. But you know, we never had these kind of anxieties of, you know, oh, now we have to be nice to each other.
Not quite as different as the experience. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Incorporate more of Thanksgiving into your every meal. Absolutely. I love it. You had a comment. What's yours?
Well, I used to do Thanksgiving at our house, or we used to do it, and I always had this idea I had to do it all myself. And when I actually let other people bring things, that reduced my anxiety a lot. And then I started figuring out ways that I could do things in advance, so it wasn't all kind of coming together just at the last minute. So I'd do the mashed potatoes like even a couple of hours in advance and keep them warm somewhere in a crock pot or something like that, and make gravy and put it in a coffee thermos, that kind of thing.
Good idea. So some planning and some practical tips, but also that idea of social fare, right? Letting everybody else participate in those positive aspects of making food with you. Good ideas. Any other comments?
Well, I always think, like, one of my favorite parts of Thanksgiving, like growing up at least, was like that it wasn't so much anxiety. I mean, it was basically a big party in the kitchen. Like, you know, we were all preparing, like having some of the guests come earlier maybe, and just having that be a social activity, and everyone, I mean, obviously your kitchen has to be large enough to accommodate that. But that made it a lot more enjoyable for everyone and less of a stressful thing. You know, when something got messed up or the whipped cream didn't look perfect, I mean, it was just fun. You know, we all did it together.
You can
so.
share in it. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. Make it more of a fun social experiment and tap into, again, that idea of community. I'll throw out one more, right? That idea of self-compassion, right? So not being your own worst critic about if the whipped cream doesn't look perfect, right? I bet everybody's going to eat it no matter how it looks. So having some compassion for yourself, you know, and giving yourself a break over the holidays, I think is really important. Other questions?
I was wondering about your take on sodium as opposed to even sugar and insulin, and the importance of sodium in or not in the diet.
Yeah. So those there are a lot of complicated questions about the what to eat. You know, is it the sodium? Is it the sugar? Is it, you know, the agave syrup versus stevia versus Splenda versus real sugar? You know, those sort of what to eat questions. Those are some of them have black and white answers. You know, less sugar is always a better approach, and I think the artificial sweeteners in general are good to stay away from, in favor of real sugars, including things like stevia and agave. But things like sodium and the degree to which you need to worry about things like sugar are highly individual and depends on what your health needs are and what your health goals are and what your risk factors are. So sorting things out in that area, that's a perfect type of question to bring to the naturopathic physicians here or to the nutritionists here, and help them sort of go through typical meals with you, what your health goals are, you know, what family risk factors you might have that you need to be more proactive about, and sort of demystifying, you know, all of those recommendations and really helping you individualize them for you and your own goals. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a general question, but I'm just wondering what your opinion is of doing a fast regularly, maybe once a month or something like that. And if so, how would you approach it?
Yeah, fasting. That's another question that that is highly individual, right? There's different metabolic types, and different people can handle fasting, and there's different definitions of fasting too, right? We have sort of the extreme of a water-only fast to perhaps a day where you're eating just fruits and vegetables, for example, right? You could sort of view those along a full continuum of fasting. And what type is appropriate and for what person and for what time of year, I think is really individual. You know, for somebody who's you know, perhaps a little bit leaner, or somebody who already struggles with blood sugar regulation issues like crashing in the middle of the afternoon, some of that hypoglycemia, they're going to want to approach fasting very carefully and with a physician's supervision, right, that can help them plan. So if you're interested in those types of things, I think they can certainly play a role perhaps seasonally in the diet, but I would encourage you to talk to a naturopathic physician to really customize it to you and your health goals and your own individual metabolism.
I would just add to that, we have some interesting research that is starting at Vassar University investigating the effects of water-only medical fasting compared to vegan diets in people who are overweight and who have high blood pressure. And we're doing this study. There's a water-only medical fasting facility down in Santa Rosa, California called True North Health. And it's run by a chiropractor, but we have a collaboration down there and we're starting this trial. And so far our results have been really interesting. We're only getting started, but he has just hundreds of case reports of people who have reversed their diabetes and gotten rid of their blood pressure, lost a lot of weight doing about 2 weeks of water-only fasting, which I realize sounds like corporal punishment to some. But it actually is safer than you might imagine. People don't die from water-only fasting. We have a lot of reserves about how to respond to bring our blood sugar back up and make sugar out of protein and make sugar out of fat. And, you know, we're very resilient. We're a very resilient species. We've made it for 3.5 million years. You know, we've done okay. We can go long periods without food. And I think that we forget about that. You know, we forget. We get this first little signal of hunger, and we think, oh my gosh, I need to eat 1,000 calories. Well, no, you don't need to eat 1,000 calories. You're going to be okay. Your body has reserves. And so we're learning a lot more about fasting. And I've really changed in my own feeling having started some of this research and seeing the cases that are coming out and the really dramatic improvements that are being made in people's cardiovascular fitness. And for me now, it makes intuitive sense to give the body a rest. And if you think about your example of 1 day per month without food, that's 12 days out of the year where your body gets to rest and detox and eliminate and even kind of reset. And so, as Dr. Oberg says, it doesn't work for all constitutions, and it certainly, you need to be careful with certain medications, and that's why having a physician, and I would suspect that a naturopathic physician would really be the only physician that would help lead you through a fast. I suspect if you spoke with your medical doctor about a fast, they would probably not have very much helpful information to offer you, and would probably even discourage it. But I actually think it can be a very good idea and a very healthful activity for the right people.
Good questions. Yeah.
I'm high on the fretting scale because I have a lot of food issues. I have some sensitivities and I'm hypoglycemic, and if I get hungry I have to eat like 5 minutes from now or else I turn into a monster. So, there's just so food is in my mind a lot of the time. So I'm just wondering, how can I kind of calm that whole system down?
Well, usually, the way I usually approach that with patients is really identifying what's the underlying cause for having so many food sensitivities and for having so much reactive hypoglycemia. Right? There are likely some underlying conditions that could be addressed. Perhaps you have some GI issues or some dysbiosis or some intestinal permeability. Perhaps there's some endocrine issues in terms of how your brain responds to hunger signals or insulin, things like that. So I would really address those by looking at the underlying causes and finding strategies to reduce your hypersensitivity and the fact that you're reacting to things that your system should have tolerance to, and reducing how reactive your hypoglycemia is, and therefore you're going to have to fret less because the system is healthier and more robust and more tolerant. Other questions?
Oh yeah, I guess this is kind of a specific question again, but it relates to like the holidays in Seattle, for example, seeing how there's like the lack of vitamin D, for example, and do people have to work extra hard during this time to incorporate that aspect into their food?
Absolutely. So the question's about vitamin D, which I think is an important one to, we should stop talking and go outside for sure. This is a rare moment. A couple things about that. Our latitudes here in the Northwest make it pretty much impossible to get enough sun exposure in the winter months to get adequate vitamin D from the sun. Combine that with the fact that we're always covered up, doesn't help the effect. The average person in the Northwest in Seattle needs supplemental vitamin D during the winter. You can see a naturopath or other physician to have your level checked, but it's a pretty solid bet that you need some, whether you have your serum vitamin D measured or not. And can I give dose recommendations, or is that not a good idea?
I would not recommend it, but I mean, just because I think assessment is so important and dosing appropriately based on status.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you probably need get your blood sugar or get your serum vitamin D checked. Almost every doctor in Seattle is running that test right now, whether they're a naturopath or a conventional doctor, and then you can correct it accordingly. Sun exposure, of course, is a great option. Interestingly, dietarily, mushrooms are one of the few foods that are a dietary source of vitamin D. And when do mushrooms show up in nature? In the fall, right? That's when they come out. And so I think that's a kind of a cool observation of Mother Nature that, in the fall when our vitamin D levels are dropping, that's when mushrooms are abundant. So, any other questions? Excellent. Well, thank you all for your attention. If you have any individual questions, I'll stay up here for a few minutes.